Welcome to the Wealthsteading Podcast. This is episode 464. Today is February 20th, 2025. I'm your host, John Pugliano. I'm also the founder and money manager at investablewealth.com. Today's episode, I'm going to briefly mention some gaslighting that's going on in the stock market, or at least what I think is gaslighting. But then the real meat of the episode is going to talk about comparative advantage, like I'd mentioned in the previous episode, but I want to drill it down specifically to your personal achievement and development. Taking it out of the realm of investing and specifically dealing with stocks and things like we normally do. Today we're going to put all that aside and focus on some of the old topics that we used to cover, in the early days of the podcast that are more on that personal development side. Because remember, the tagline of Wealthsteading is that it's a holistic lifestyle to build and preserve wealth. There's no magic, there's no secret, there's no get rich quick. It's all about learning how to earn, how to save, and how to invest. Everybody wants to talk about the investing side, and that's why I've gravitated more to those topics over the years, because that's what people want to hear. And hey, this podcast is all about serving the audience and giving you what you want, obviously, as long as it's what I want to talk about. In any case, this is going to be a fairly quick episode and not one that's going to change your life. I always kind of laugh when I see people say, that podcast changed my life. Well, good for you if it does. But today's message is going to focus on those people that just don't seem to know where to get started in terms of what their comparative advantage is, or what they should do in terms of, whether you're young, what should you do in terms of what should you study, or what career path should you pursue? Or if you're older, should you, switch and go into a different career path, start a new second act in your life, maybe even after you're retired from your primary career? All that and more. I'm getting way ahead of myself. Before we get to any of that, though, right now, turbulence is up a little bit. If you read the headlines, with all the things that are going on, negotiations around trying to end the Ukraine war and the continued narrative and dialogue on tariffs and, all the chaos that Trump likes to operate in, if you read the headlines, you'd think the world was coming to an end. If you actually look at the performance, in terms of performance of the stock market, you'd see that things are nowhere near as bad and gloomy and doomy as the media narrative is perpetuating. In fact, the narrative has gotten so bad that as of last week, one of the key investor sentiment surveys had gotten to the lowest point that it's been in 12 months. Now it picked up just a little bit this week, but as of last week, just the regular mom and pop retail investor crowd was petrified of a major market correction like they hadn't been worried about in over 12 months. Are things really that bad? Now, again, we're not going to delve into that in this episode, but generally I look at those investor sentiment surveys as contrarian indicators. And again, look at the stock performance. If the world is really about to come to an end with trade wars, or the U.S. is no longer going to have allies in Europe, just all the negative headlines, and major layoffs in federal workers. And step back here too. I'm not being political here. I'm not saying any of this is or isn't happening. I'm just saying, again, if you look at the headlines and how negative so many things are, inflation, for example, in January inflation numbers skyrocketing, Federal Reserve isn't going to cut rates. And a lot of that being blamed on Trump. And hey, he's got plenty to get blamed for, but keep in mind that during the month of January, he was literally president for maybe 11 days? So I don't think that if inflation soared during January, it was all Trump's fault. In fact, if you've listened to me, I would put the blame on the Federal Reserve and say that they never had inflation under control, and they should have never cut rates like they did last year, especially ahead of the election. In any case, for all the gloom and doom, year to date, the S&P 500 is up about 3.6% as I record this episode. And other markets, global markets, are up in some cases 3 or 4 times that amount. Look at Germany. Year to date, it's up over 13.5%. Now, this is an economy that's potentially going to be faced with tariffs from the U.S. It's an economy that's potentially going to have to pay a lot more for defense if the U.S. pulls out of NATO or the U.S. stops backing Ukraine and they want to continue it. It also increases potentially the level of war just on their border. And we know that nothing is improved with their energy costs. It's a good, I'd say at least 3 times, if not a lot more, the cost of energy in the industrial sector in Germany than if you built that same thing and used our energy here in the U.S. And yet with all that, they're still up over 13% just in the last 7 weeks or so. And that's not an exception to Germany. Most major markets, international markets, are up significantly, well outperforming the U.S. Some people ask about that. I've said before, I'll buy a couple international stocks, but as for me and my money, it's staying in the U.S., it's staying in North America primarily. And I look for emerging and developing markets that are in the Midwestern part of this country. They're going to be based on the merging of technology and industrialization, because I think long term, certainly over the next 5 to 10 years, that's where the growth and the profits are going to be made. So no, I'm not going to be throwing my money into Germany or these other places. But apparently somebody is. And I do want to point out, though, in U.S. dollars, you will hear about the German stock market making all-time new record highs. Well, if you price it in U.S. dollars and you look at it in terms of like an ETF that you could purchase to invest in Germany, yeah, their market is up significantly. It's definitely up a lot in the last few months. But we've been here before in the German market. And in fact, they are right now still at about the level where their U.S. dollar denominated stock market, and if you price it in U.S. dollars, we're about the same point where it was when it peaked before the Great Recession in like 2007. So nearly 20 years later, if you were invested in U.S. dollar denominated German stocks, over the last 20 years, you're just kind of getting back to where you were, and that's without factoring in, the massive amounts of inflation that your purchasing power has lost over the last 20 years. And again, we've been here before with the German economy. It did that big peak in like 2007, the end of 2007. It got up near about that level about a decade later at the end of 2017. And then it fell apart and it got back up there again after most of the hysteria of the pandemic wore off in, say, mid-early 2021. And you know what? It collapsed again. And now we're just getting back to that level. So is it going to break out and go up another 20 or 30% from here? I have no idea. But if it does, it's going there without my money. I would also say, look at most of the gains in the DAX, and it's coming from SAP is doing so well. So they kind of have a magnificent one over there. Again, I don't want to really talk about the market in this episode. We're going to definitely get to that probably over the weekend. But I will end by saying, remember what I brought up about investor sentiment? Investor sentiment is extremely low, and yet the major U.S. indices are all up for the year. And so who's buying it, right? If the retail, the mom and pop, the regular retail traders, if they're scared to death to be in the U.S. market because of all the negative stuff they see in the headlines, then why is the market up? Obviously, somebody must be putting money into the market. And my argument would be that it's probably the smart money on Wall Street that's reading the headlines and using that as a contrarian indicator. But I digress too much. Today's topic I want to talk about is really a carryover to what we talked about in the previous episode about comparative advantage. But on this one, I want to drill down and speak just about your comparative advantage. What makes you a more valuable employee? How do you get a pay raise? How can you make more money? How can you start your own business? How can you improve the productivity and profit margins of your existing business? How can you switch careers and get into something that you like and that you feel you have a great deal of passion about as compared to what you're currently making as a living? Now, we're not going to specifically answer all those questions in this episode. That's kind of what I've been trying to do over the last more than a decade. So I would encourage you to go back. You can always go to the website, wealthstenning.com. There's a search feature in there somewhere, and you can put in keywords like career, or you can look at some of the tags on episodes that dealt with careers or dealt with personal development. And, there's a whole treasure trove of episodes there that you can listen to that are archived. It's all free. It's not behind any paywalls. I'm not trying to make any money off of this. Well, actually, my greedy intent is that I'll inspire you as a listener to earn more money or start your business or improve your business and make gobs of money and be so successful and so absorbed in what you do for a living that you'll hire my firm to manage your money. But that's my little business marketing plan, and we'll keep that secret. So what I want to drill down on today is where you get started, because this is what I hear from so many people, and it doesn't matter whether they're 15 or whether they're 58 or much older than that. I always hear from people that are unhappy in their current career, or they feel like they're directionless. They always want to know, how do I get started? How do I know what my comparative advantage is? How do I know what I'm good at? Should I follow my passions? Should I learn a new skill? Listen, as far as the endless debates in social media and all the influencers about whether you should follow your passion or not follow your passion, I've said this in the past. It depends what your passion is and how good you are at it and if you can market it. Listen, I could be passionate about singing, but I can guarantee no one's going to pay me to hear me sing. Because although I might be passionate and I might love it, I can't sing. I can't carry a tune. I don't have rhythm. Now, does that mean you shouldn't follow your passion? No. I mean, why in the world? I mean, this even kind of goes without saying. Why would you pursue a career that you hate? I mean, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. So just ignore all the debates about follow your passion, don't follow your passion. You want to do things you enjoy that you can make money at, that you can monetize. And again, it's whether you're an employee or whether you're starting your own business. It all comes back to what you can do better than other people and that you enjoy. And I say better than other people because that's where the marketing end of it comes in, to the market forces, that comparative advantage. You may love baking pies, and your pies may be exceptionally delicious and tasty. But if you don't have the commercial kitchen and the ability to produce pies at a reasonable price that consumers are willing to buy them from you, then you're never going to be more than a little niche hobby. Because no matter how good your pies are, if you can't get the price points, it doesn't matter. You don't have a comparative advantage. And just in terms of personal skills, let's say you're a bricklayer. I mean, that's a easier maybe case to look at than a pie maker. If you're a bricklayer, no matter how much you love laying brick, no matter how passionate you are about it, if it takes you 3 times as long to lay a brick as the regular guy that does it, then you're never going to be competitive. So you have to be at least better than the average. Now, the good news in all this is that most people are so lazy and so unmotivated that it isn't hard to be better than the average in most things, which is probably why you're in a career or a job that you don't like. You fell into it because you earned a living at it, because you just had to be better than average and you didn't even have to really care about it to be better than most people. And so you're getting compensated for it. But now you've been doing that for 5, 10, 20 or more years. And you're like, hey, I hate this. It doesn't fit into my passion. It's not the direction I want to be in, but I do make money at it. Well, that's where you got to step back and say, okay, what can you not only be better than average at, but also what do you like, right? That is where the passion comes in. But it's more than just what do you like or what are you passionate about. My argument would be that that comparative advantage is innate to your unique characteristics of genetic and personality and, what I call or what I refer to as God-given talent. You have certain God-given talents and abilities that are different than anybody else. Just like your fingerprint is different than anybody else. And personally, I say God-given talent. For some reason that offends some people. If it does, if it offends you, hey, hit the unsubscribe button. I really don't care. I use God as a synonym for your creator, right? If you want to believe that your creator is simply evolutionary forces, that's fine. It doesn't matter to me, but you were created for a purpose, whether it was just evolutionary forces that through the centuries have formed your DNA in a specific way, or whether it was some supernatural, intelligence-driven reason. You believe what you want. But either way, it's undisputed that you are created for some kind of a purpose and you are unique from all other individuals. And therein lies the problem and the solution. If you have ended up in a career or you're studying something to put yourself in a career for something that you don't feel your heart's in, then you're probably going through dis-ease. You're uneasy. You're trying to force what your God-given talents and abilities are, what your innate strength is. You're trying to force that into a mold to be a cog in a wheel, to earn an income at something. Again, you may be good at it, but you just don't like it. You don't like it because it doesn't fit that unique DNA fingerprint of talents and abilities that you and only you have. And that's the problem and the solution, right? The problem is figuring out what your DNA fingerprint is. That's step 1, and then step 2 is learning how to monetize it. Now, again, we're not going to cover all that in this episode. I just want to get you started in the direction of what that talent and ability DNA fingerprint looks like. How to discover your comparative advantage. What makes you more productive or efficient at a particular task than anybody else? Because again, we're all different. Some people are introverted. Some people are extroverted. Some people like sports. Some people like to read books. Some people would rather deal with data and numbers and analytics, while other people want to deal with other people. The problem with the corporatization of the world is that we try and make everybody a cog in a wheel. We try and force people into positions that they're really not fitted for. Most of that comes down to the poor educational system we have. And one of the reasons I am optimistic for the future is that I think that technology is going to change that. My grandkids are going to learn things a whole lot different than I learned them because they have the advantage to study the topics and the subjects that they have an innate interest in because there's no gatekeeper to the access of the knowledge that they could acquire to get that kind of knowledge. When I was a kid, if I wanted to study a topic or learn about something, I had to go to the library and read an encyclopedia that was probably 10 years old. We don't have those problems today. So again, I'm very optimistic about the future, and especially for those of you that take charge of your future, it's going to be very bright. So what is your comparative advantage? How do you know where to start? How do you take those first steps to developing your skills and abilities and your talents if you don't know what they are? Well, let's start with a really simple entry point. And let me do it through a story or an analogy. Let's say that you're one of those people that absolutely hates snakes, right? And I know you're out there, right? You just hear the word snake and you get like this quiver up your spine. Okay, so you're that kind of person and you just finished a long day at work. Let's say it's Friday afternoon. You're coming home. You're tired. You just want to sit on the couch and put up your feet, maybe drink a beverage of your choice, maybe turn on the idiot TV. But more than anything, you just want to sit down on your couch in the living room and relax. And so you come in through the front door. As you open it and you take the first step into your house, you see a big black snake slither across the floor and go under your couch. Now, if you hate snakes, you've probably already run out of the house at this point. But let's say that your phobia isn't that bad, or at least not that extreme, that you could at least remain in the house. Is there any way you're going to go sit down and relax on that couch and put up your feet and drink a beer or something? If you hate snakes, if you know there's a snake underneath that couch, you're going to forget how tired and how, exhausted you were from a week's worth of work. And again, you're probably going to bolt out of that house. You're going to have no desire to sit down and relax anywhere in that house as long as you know a snake is there. And you're most likely not going to get a broom and try and fish the snake out or pick up the couch and move it and look for the snake. You hate snakes. You're petrified of snakes. You probably even stopped listening to this episode at this point because you don't even want to hear me talk about snakes. Right? You can put that visual image in your mind of someone that has a snake phobia, even if you don't. You can understand that because you've met people like that. Well, what does this have to do with comparative advantage and discovering your own God-given talents and abilities? And especially marketable, meaning talents and abilities that you can monetize? Well, I can guarantee you, no matter how broke you are, how much money you don't have, if you're afraid of snakes and you just saw a snake slither underneath your couch, you will take all the money you have in the world and pay someone to come into your house and get rid of that snake. Okay? That's a need, a want, a need, call it what you want, but there's a market niche there. And it's unfulfilled in terms of your universe because there ain't no way in the world you're going to go catch that snake. It's not in your innate ability. It's not in your DNA. You have no desire to get outside of your comfort zone and all the, stretch your potential and all the stuff you hear people say because you hate snakes. You don't want to see snakes. You don't want to know anything about snakes. You just want that snake out of your house. Now, on the flip side of it, there are people in this audience, and I know you guys, you love snakes. You love reptiles. And while you'd not only be thrilled if someone paid you to come over and catch that snake and take it out of the house, you'd most likely even do it for free. That's how much you have an affinity for snakes and reptiles. You see the point here? Two human beings that could be identical in every way. Demographics, race, sex, education, social status, income level, it doesn't matter. They could be as near as identical twins as possible in terms of every measure, but for whatever reason, one of them has an innate fear and hatred of snakes, and the other person has a love and a compassion that could be viewed as equally pathological. Extreme example, but there are examples like that in almost everything in life. And while you may not have a good grasp of what your talents and abilities are, or what you really want to pursue, or what's marketable, the best place to get started, that best step towards the discovery process of your comparative advantage, is start thinking in terms of what do you really hate and what do you really love. And again, not necessarily passionate, because, in terms of the person that wants to avoid a snake, it's not so much that they're passionate about avoiding snakes, they just don't ever even think about snakes to begin with. So it isn't that they have a passion in avoiding snakes, they just have a hatred of snakes. So put it in those very black and white terms. What do you absolutely love versus what do you really hate? Or what do you absolutely fear versus what you absolutely enjoy? And just take a big old piece of paper. Write the hates and the uncomfortable dislike items on one side of the paper, and then the corollary to that, write the things that you love and the things that you're very comfortable with. Then look at that list and see how many of those things you hate are actually part of what you do in your daily life, or maybe not things that you do, but things that you are exposed to at work or in your current job or career that make you hate your job, right? Maybe you're not a public speaker, but the reason you hate your job is because you do get in those situations where you have to talk during a meeting or you have to make a presentation, and you love 99% of your job, you just hate that one aspect of it. Yeah, you could go get therapy. Yeah, you could go to a master course in Toastmasters and learn how to talk in front of people. You could do all that, but you could also learn to like snakes if you don't like them, and you don't want to do that. Stay in your comfort zone. My recommendation would be that you don't try and get out of your comfort zone, but you should maximize the things in your comfort zone that you can do better than other people. If you're fantastic in your job in all areas other than the public speaking side, well, just don't do that, right? Focus on the things that can make you money that are more dealing with data or analytics, working with your hands or whatever you're doing in your main job that you don't want to communicate with other people. Don't do it. Don't focus on that part. You can always hire a mouthpiece. If it's something that you're uncomfortable doing, don't force yourself to do it. Trust me on this. I'm a guy that has been forced into all kinds of situations. And yeah, I've gotten out of my comfort zone and I've had growth and development and all these other things. But let me tell you, the most money I've ever made is when I'm dead smack in the zone of my comfort zone. And it's not only the most money I've ever made, it's the most money I've ever enjoyed. So start there. Start with that snake analogy. Figure out what you absolutely love and what you absolutely hate. And then start orienting your life towards things that are in your comfort zone that you're most likely to be, marketable at. Again, because if you're petrified of that snake, you are going to pay hard-earned money to have someone come in and remove that snake. There's areas like that throughout life. Whatever that pain point is, it's not just unique to you. There's a whole society where the economic system is based on pain points. And the way you monetize and take advantage and make money off of your talents and abilities is that you focus on providing that product or service to relieve someone else's choke point or pain point, because they will pay good money for that. But you just want to make sure that it's also not a choke point or pain point for you. And the possibilities are endless. Now, think about what Mark Twain said, probably one of the most amazing things he's ever said, and he said a lot. But the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. And that's really the essence of what I'm talking about today. You were born and created with certain innate God-given talents and abilities. None of that's going to do you or anybody else any good until you figure out what they are. So why were you born? What's your purpose? And I think a good place to start to discover that comparative advantage is to focus on those things, not so much that you're passionate about, but your comfort zone and avoiding the things you hate. So try it out and let me know how it works for you. Until then, as always, this is John Pugliano wishing you the very best returns.